Democrats try to regroup. Republicans want to make changing the Constitution harder. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. The dust has mostly settled after last week's election. J.D. Vance has had his first U.S. Senate orientation in Washington. Democrats and Republicans at the State House began picking their leaders for the next session. Ohio Republicans are still basking in the glory of their big wins. Ohio Democrats are trying to figure out how to dig themselves out of a decades-long slump. Brian Rothenberg, how do they dig themselves out of this losing streak?
I was away for a while, but, so I've been in this position before answering this question. But look, you're never as good as on election day as you think you are, and you're never as bad. The U.S. Senate race was 7 points apart. That's actually a 3.5-point swing when you think about it. But we didn't win. We didn't do a good job, and there are three things they need to do in a major way. One, we've never been able to figure out how to deal with the election turnout in the big cities in non-presidential years. Two, the ex-urban counties. I'm from Portage County. When I first came up as a young guy, there was like one Republican office holder. It's all Republican. So these ex-urban counties, Lorain, Portage, Trumbull, here in Licking County, Clark County, they've got to build up an infrastructure and do that at the local level. And then in the rural areas in this state, you can lose Pac-Man style. That's how Ted Strickland lost to John Kasich. So you have to figure out what a win number is. It's not getting above 50%. It might be 42 or 43. But if you do those fundamentals and you really work at it, you can rebound from this. But it takes a lot of work. It really does.
Mike, are there any signs of trouble for Republicans?
Well, I think there's always, I agree with Brian to a great degree, there's always trouble. I mean, look at the local stuff, as we did very poorly with it, and I suppose that'll happen for quite some time. But anything can happen. I mean, I've been part of both situations where the Republicans control everything statewide and the Democrats control everything statewide. I mean, it is a pendulum. And obviously most Democrats are going to vote Democrat, most Republicans, Republican. But the true independents can decide any election. And if they decide they don't like somebody, the other side's going to win. I don't think they really care if that other side is an R or a D. They're going to vote for the person they think is best. And so each election is different. I think Republicans make a big mistake if they sit around and think, well, we've got this, we're going to be here forever, because that's not going to be true.
Andrew, I haven't seen a whole lot of finger pointing or blaming, backstabbing among Democrats. Have you heard any of that? Is there any kind of Monday morning quarterbacking?
There's been a little bit of that, actually. Yeah, there's, Nan Whaley lost by 25 points. And, personally, I think that beating an incumbent's very difficult. Mike DeWine had a lot of crossover appeal. So I'm not sure if you put in any other candidate that the outcome is really all that different. But she did lose by a near historic margin. Sherrod Brown kind of is like a mentor of hers, and so he's kind of catching some flack too, kind of indirectly. So I think the question for Democrats, I guess, is if somebody else is nominated, do they lose by 20? Does that help get Tim Ryan over the line? So there is some of those kinds of questions flying around, and it'll be interesting to see how they're resolved heading into 2024.
Sherrod Brown is up in 2 years. He has to be starting to think about running and his reelection campaign, and he has to be a little bit worried.
I think he has to be a little bit worried, but I mean, the thing to remember about Sherrod Brown is he's already a known quantity. It's not like Ohioans need to rediscover, Sherrod Brown. They know what they're getting with him. And, he's if you look at Ryan, Tim Ryan took a lot of pages out of Sherrod Brown's playbook. And he did better, he performed better than the other Democrats by doing so. So it kind of tells you a lot about Ohio and how Ohio thinks. And don't forget that it's going to be a very different landscape 2 years from now, and there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be different, plus it's a presidential year.
Race, yeah.
So there's a lot going on.
Brian, you were up in Michigan before you came back. It's a very similar state. It's a industrial-based economy for a long time, rural, urban, but they have a Democratic governor. They have a Democratic legislature for the first time in a long time, thanks to redistricting reform. But why is Ohio so different than Michigan?
Well, when I got there, by the way, Michigan was very much like Ohio is now, which gets to Mike's point, which is this can change on a dime. But the big thing was you elected a very populist governor. And frankly, Donald Trump became the symbol of the midterms, not Joe Biden up there. Redistricting in the legislature is a totally different topic. And even in Ohio, where Donald Trump was a factor, like the congressional races, that happened. I think it was a big mistake, down ticket here, that Donald Trump did not become that kind of, it wasn't a referendum on him and his divisive politics, because it actually played out nationally and in our congressional races in Ohio better.
All right, well, a week after the 2022 election was over, the 2024 campaign officially began with former President Donald Trump announcing he wants to continue his presidency into a second term, albeit interrupted by Joe Biden. Republicans around the country have mixed feelings about another Trump run. Here in Ohio, State Senator Matt Dolan, who ran for U.S. Senate, opposes Trump's bid. Congressman Jim Jordan, Mike Carey, and Max Miller all endorsed the former president. So, Mike Miller, here we go again. Are we ready for it? Ohioans, they seem to like the president. J.D. Vance was his pick, and he won.
Well, I think that if Trump runs again, the Republicans are not going to win. I don't care whether Biden runs again, whoever they put in his place, I don't think Trump can win. I think Trump was extremely, caused a lot of divisiveness in the Republican Party. I think we lost a number of races nationwide because of Trump. And what scares me really more than anything is not that he gets the nomination, because I don't think he will, but if he, knowing, not that I know him, but guessing what Trump would do, he's able to then run on a third party. And I think the strongest thing the Democrats have going for themselves, going for them right now nationwide, is Donald Trump. I think it'd be a disaster if he's the candidate.
We've heard this before. 2016, Brian.
We have heard this before, and you know, I do think that Donald Trump nationally and even in Ohio will cause all kinds of consternation. I thought that the way Mike DeWine handled the Donald Trump issue this time was way different than other states like Michigan and New York and other places. He kind of dipped his toe so he didn't get criticized. I think he was on stage with him for 25 seconds. But then the rest of the time, he knew he needed these crossover votes, and he was really going after these crossover votes because he was afraid Tim might win, and he needed Democratic votes if that was the case.
Yeah, well, let's take a look at the polls in Ohio. They consistently show strong support in Ohio for Donald Trump. An Emerson College poll done just before this past election had Trump with a 12-point lead over Joe Biden in Ohio. Joe Ingles, he's still very popular here. But Republican, I didn't see the overwhelming Republican leaders saying go Donald Trump in 2024 like they were doing at the end of the 2016 campaign.
No, I mean, there you go.
Yeah.
You know, that's what they're doing. I think that if you look out in the rural areas, in the small towns, you're going to see a lot of support for former President Trump. I mean, I know when I drive to and from Fayette County every week, I see a lot of big signs, barns, you know, things that, not just a little yard sign, but these are things that people went out and put up huge shrines to Donald Trump on their properties. And I don't think that that's something that we ever saw in a candidate, and I don't see any kind of fervor like that for anyone else.
My favorite sign is up in Holmes County. They had a big Trump sign, but it said Trump Pence, and the guy had put duct tape across Mike Pence's name. So, but Andrew, I mean, if he runs again, but he could have the same thing he had in 2016, where there were 15 Republican candidates running. And he was able to capture just enough to get the nomination.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see new polling on this. Like, I think that, you know, I don't perceive that Donald Trump has lost outright support among, you know, kind of the diehard Republicans and even kind of the solid Republicans. I think, but Ron DeSantis, some of these national polls show him leading Trump all of a sudden. And granted, they're taking these kind of on the darkest hour, sort of, you know, when everybody's feeling bad about the Republican side about not taking the Senate. So I'll take that with a grain of salt. But I think some of the things that you'll see Republicans start to ask is, does Donald Trump have baggage? Can we do better as a party? And Ron DeSantis presents potentially an alternative. So it's a long way off, but it'll be interesting to see how that question shakes out, because for the first time, I think you never saw Donald Trump losing a Republican poll previously. So that's different for me.
Yeah, you wonder how that Ohio poll would have been if it was taken after the election, even though his candidate did well here in Ohio. His other candidates around the country did not do well. Maybe Ohio
the
voters
only
would
correction I'd have is I'm not sure the question is does he have baggage? It's does he not have baggage, and does it matter his baggage?
Yeah. Mike Miller, you're a former prosecutor. You know, he's under investigation. They named a special counsel today to try to take some of the heat off of the Attorney General's office. It won't be directly involved in investigating the Mar-a-Lago document situation. But what do prosecutors do? Do they prosecute Donald Trump, investigate Donald Trump like they would any other citizen? Or no, you know, he's running for president again. How do you balance that?
Well, I guess that depends on the special prosecutor himself, who I don't know. You told me Jack Smith is his name or something.
But even Merrick Garland on these other investigations.
Well, you know, I'm really worried about that. You want to treat him like anybody else, and yet I'm concerned that if something happens and he's actually charged, the problems it's going to cause in the country. I just think there's a number of people, the far right and the far left, all of whom, in my opinion, are almost mental problems. And you saw what happened January the 6th. Hard to believe that it could actually happen, and it did. And I can see something happening again if Trump is indicted, charged, what have you. I think the powers that be, if they really look at this politically as opposed to maybe just the law itself, I don't think the Democrats want that to happen. I don't think Joe Biden wants that to happen. I don't know Joe Biden either, but I think a lot of people don't want it to happen. Whether it should or shouldn't, so far as the law goes, is one thing, but sometimes other things enter into it. So
Reality.
we'll wait and see what happens, but I don't think it's going to be pretty either way.
Yeah. All right. Republican leaders want to make changing the Ohio Constitution harder than it is now. Right now, there are two ways to get a proposed amendment on the ballot. State lawmakers can do it with a 60% margin, or voters can do it by collecting hundreds of thousands of signatures. Once it is on the ballot, a simple majority of votes cast changes the Constitution. Secretary of State Frank LaRose now wants to make it so amendments would have to be approved by 60% of Ohio voters. LaRose says the 50% bar is too low.
Something as serious as amending our Constitution should really demand the kind of consensus necessary to get to 60%.
Ironically, if this gets to the ballot, this change to the Constitution would only require a simple majority. Andrew Tobias, Frank LaRose talks about special interest as well, and that's why he's pushing this.
Yeah, this dates back for a while. I mean, for me, you saw the smoke-free issue in 2008. I think maybe it was 2006. It was a while ago, but you had, you know, people wanted to have a smoking ban, and in the tobacco industry who wanted to have kind of like an alternative. You know, so you just see industries going in. You see that they legalized casinos, and not only did they legalize gambling, but they wrote the GPS coordinates or the parcels or whatever into the Ohio Constitution. So this is a long-standing complaint. But, you know, it's interesting, obviously, that it's coming on the precipice of maybe an abortion statewide issue coming up. There's marijuana legalization measure that's kind of floating around. And there's even, there's some other things, too, that I've caught wind of that might be more concerning to Republicans, like ranked choice voting, for instance. That's something that there's some, you know, steam behind. So I feel that if they were to pursue this, they might actually just move the timeline up for some of these other issues. So I don't know if the idea is to prevent a particular issue from happening, if it really does anything practically. But, you know, also at the same time, I don't really have a sense of how much consensus there is behind this issue. So I'm just not, I don't have a clear sense of where this one's going.
The timetable, Joe, is pretty aggressive. They want to get this done during the lame duck session here, now basically before Christmas, and then maybe put it on the ballot in May, which would prevent an issue possibly in November of 23.
Right, right. I think one thing we need to remember here is there's a what's good for the goose is good for the gander kind of thing, and the legislature could go ahead under this proposal and put something on the ballot, and they'd only need a simple majority. You know, so it wouldn't apply. I think you know, that's going to be something that voters are going to look at, and you know, of course they want to get it on the ballot in May because that would head off the things you mentioned. It might head off the marijuana ballot issue. It might head off an abortion ballot issue, ranked choice. Who knows what's out there that might come before voters.
Brian Rutherford, It is, changing the Constitution should be hard. It's very hard to change the U.S. Constitution. It's almost impossible these days.
Not so easy even with the signature collection, Mike.
But when the vote comes around, isn't 60% a reasonable threshold, that it's more than just 50% plus one?
I'm going to borrow from Mike and the legal profession. This is res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. It is coming because of Dobbs. It is coming because they know overwhelmingly people don't agree with this legislature about abortion. They want to change the way you can do it so they can prevent that. It is purely being done for one issue, and that is the pro-life issue, to manipulate and keep voters from being able to do this. It is what it is, and people, they can spin it all they want. I spin for a living. You can't spin around this one.
Mike, do you agree? Is this just to prevent an abortion question from passing?
Oh, I don't think so. I appreciate Brian's thoughts, but I'm like you said about the the United States Constitution. It's very hard to change. I think it should be. Other states have this 60%. I believe Illinois has it. Florida has it. So you got a liberal state or a Democrat state, Republican state. The idea of just everything coming onto the Constitution, any change whatsoever, let's make a constitutional amendment, just sits badly with me, and I'm not worried about abortion. Let's have the vote on it. Let people make their choice. They should. I don't think it's going to be as easy as you think, Brian, because if they put that on, they got to draw a line someplace. They are not going to say abortion good up to 9 months. They're not going to say that. Right. And when you draw that line, there's going to be people on either side of it, reasonable people, not just the.
But Mike, I do have to say this: this legislature is trying to play a lot of games like that. They're trying to do that. They're trying to change the rules on the Board of Education because they got Democrats elected there. You have Bill Seitz saying he wants to change the rules even on the Court of Appeals lines, just because, as he said, there are liberals that got elected down in Cincinnati. He's point blank saying that. It is, even the voting stuff, it's all very aimed at partisan reasons.
You look back at the history, the gay marriage ban amendment back in 2004, that got 62% support, Andrew. So it's not impossible to get 60%. The abortion issue, if you had this line, as Mike said, if you would have put probably the 6-week abortion ban on the ballot right now, that might lose, even with the 60% threshold.
Yeah, some of the polls out there suggest that to be the case, for this election cycle. So I guess it really depends on what the turnout environment is and stuff like that. So I haven't looked back in the history of the constitutional amendments, the ones that, honestly, I don't even remember the ones that passed this time if they got 60%. I think they did.
70%, over 70 for each of them.
So some of the more controversial issues probably push closer to that line. I haven't done the research, but you mentioned the gay marriage thing in 2004. Like, people often say that George W. Bush won Ohio because of the turnout that kind of inspired. I don't know if that's true or not, but Democrats in the aftermath of this election are talking about how, whether it's the abortion measure, whether there's a $15 minimum wage measure that's floating around, they do view these things in terms of election cycles. And I have to wonder if Republicans too are thinking about 2024 and wanting to take the Senate seat too, which, like I said before, if the goal is try to head off a specific issue, I'm not sure it'll be successful. If it is to try to head off a turnout environment in 2024 they don't want to deal with, maybe they can be successful there. So I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. Of course, lawmakers will not wait for a voter referendum to consider changes to Ohio's abortion law. The current so-called heartbeat law is on hold after a judge's ruling on the 6-week ban. Some lawmakers want to ban all abortions with no or very few exceptions. Senate President Matt Huffman has floated the idea of just adjusting the language of the current 6-week ban. Joe Ingles, we were kind of anticipating some major movement on the abortion issue during this lame duck session. What's going on?
Well, we don't know really what they're going to do, but I think what they do want to do is clean up some of the language, clarify some of the language, because right now the Republicans have a problem. When the abortion ban was in effect, we heard story after story after story of doctors who couldn't perform abortions on women who had problem pregnancies. We heard about the 10-year-old that was a rape victim who had to go over to Indiana to get an abortion. These kind of stories do not play well for the other side that wants this ban. So, when they're in there trying to fix this, they're going to be trying to construct it very carefully in a way that they can live with the outcome and it doesn't look so extreme, because right now it looks extreme to a lot of people if you look at polling.
Andrew, because next session the Republicans will have even larger majorities than they have now. Mike DeWine is still the governor, very much opposed to abortion rights. Is there urgency to do something during this lame duck session, like a complete ban?
I don't see any reason why they couldn't hold off, although it's just a really strange environment in the legislature right now because of the new speaker vote. You know, Derek Marin was selected this week, and I don't think that was, people did not favor him to win the race, so I think people are kind of digesting that. I think that they look at some of these congressional districts that they want to pick up. I think, you know, that's always something that's in the back of my mind on this, because there are very few competitive congressional districts in America anymore. And so either party, if they get a majority there, is likely to be very slim. And so their thought could be, honestly, to try to avoid this kind of issue. It might not be controversial statewide in the way that they're going to lose their supermajority in the state legislature, but it could be controversial in these congressional districts. So they may want to see how redistricting plays out. So they're just things that I don't see why they wouldn't wait, but also I just, I'm not in charge. I don't really know why people pick the things they do in lame duck. So,
Mike, this isn't as easy as it sounded before the Dobbs decision. It was like abortion is evil, it's wrong, we should ban it. Dobbs comes down, all of a sudden lawmakers now have to do it, and it's not as easy as it was before that decision.
Well, I'm sure not too many of them were happy with that decision, because now it falls on their shoulders is what to do. They much preferred the broad look of the previous law, Roe v. Wade. It's not going to be easy, and some people they seem to get overlooked. I'm not one of them, but there are a fair amount of people in this country and in this state that just believe abortion is wrong. Now, whether they're right or wrong, that's everybody takes their opinion. But it isn't just, it's a moral question to many people. And as Joe was saying, where it really gets sticky, or as Brian was saying too, where do you draw the line? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 3 months? I don't know. And what do we do about the 10-year-old? And what do we do about rape and incest? I mean, to me, I'm sort of a middle guy on all this stuff, but I don't know how you don't make an exception for rape and incest. Although my friend Mike Gatadakis, when Mike's been on the program, has said no exceptions whatsoever. And I like Mike. I just happen to disagree with him on that.
Brian,
it's an emotional issue. It's like the death penalty. It's never going to change. You're for it. You're against it. It's just difficult.
In this environment, Brian, I'm guessing there's no room for compromise.
How do you compromise on just
you could go 15 weeks, something like that.
They're not gonna. They can't even get themselves on the same page. And frankly, the reason this is going through in lame duck, I think, right now it's gonna accelerate, is because of Derek Marin, because he's sort of an absolutist like Mike Gatadakis on this issue. So Huffman rules the roost on a lot of things right now, and he's probably looking at it saying, we're in trouble if we don't get some of these exceptions in there if I don't do it now. But he's in a difficult spot because he loses his base if he actually says that. So time to do it is lame duck, as opposed to do it next year and have to deal with the new speaker.
Is there any possible repercussions if they rush it through during lame duck? I mean, Indiana tried to rush it through right before the election. They couldn't do it. They did it eventually, but it was a long time. It was really hard for that state, which is very conservative.
Sure, there are repercussions. One of the things that we have is a legislature that probably is to the right of voters, and that's thanks to gerrymandering and the primary determining who's on the ballot, basically who's going to win in some cases. And so now you've got some lawmakers, as Brian just pointed out, who are poised to pounce on this issue, but they may be to the right on this issue of the general electorate. And you've got to kind of watch, because some of those independent voters that went for Governor DeWine, they see him as someone who's more moderate. Those are the same voters that are going to be up for grabs in 2024, and they may really take offense if you go too far to the right on it.
But if abortion was on the ballot this cycle, Andrew, abortion opponents won in Ohio. All the candidates statewide and legislature.
Yeah, the issue that voters might have had in mind, which polls say this, was inflation, and maybe they don't trust Democrats to handle the economy. We saw in Kentucky, where abortion was on the ballot, that a ban measure failed, and so voters make decisions for like myriad reasons. Yeah. I think that were the legislature to push an absolute ban through, that would probably, similar to trying to raise the threshold for the constitutional majority, I think it would probably just inflame the pro-choice groups.
Galvanize
And
folks.
so, I don't know. Like, I'm not the strategist here, but yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Let's get to off the record final parting shots. Brian Rothenberg up first.
I think we're going to get through this lame duck, but we're going to get into the next session, and the new speaker and the Senate president are going to be clashing a lot, and it's going to cause issues in terms of getting things productively passed, especially because Mike DeWine can't referee because his vetoes can be overridden.
All right. Mike Miller.
Well, just a couple of thoughts. Number one, happy thoughts, both of them. Terry Francona, Manager of the Year for the Cleveland Guardians.
Yes.
Yay.
Thought I was going to say Indians, which I'm very happy with, and also very happy that I don't have to see another political ad for another 8 or 9 months.
That's right. Andrew.
It just strikes me how quickly after the 2022 election ended that I'm already thinking about 2024. And I failed to mention earlier that Frank LaRose is probably a leading Republican Senate candidate. And so, yeah, it never stops.
It never stops. Joe Ingles.
Earlier this week, we saw a flap with Ticketmaster, Taylor Swift tickets that were going for $22,000 right after the botched sale of tickets. And we saw also the Billy Joel and Stevie Nicks concert coming to Ohio Stadium next year. $189 ticket. The fees and the taxes on that ticket are $53.
Wow.
So if lawmakers are wanting a bipartisan issue that they can get behind, this is probably somewhere that they can get most everyone to say, yeah, those fees are getting a little steep.
All right. My off-the-record comment, I want to thank our producer, Darren McDonald. This is his last show. He moves on to bigger and better things here at WOSU. We will miss him, but we thank him for his dedication to this program. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online and on Facebook. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.